marriage is, in a way, one piece of paradise that we have left from the garden.
Around the world, as promised, a remnant remains, who keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus Christ. Welcome to Remnant Podcast.
All right, so this is possibly, if things go well, going to be our first posted episode for Remnant Podcast and for what me and you are doing, Couples Corner. And I have been thinking about this today, like what would we talk about? And if I don't, I'm ahead of the game here because I'm hitting you with this totally off the cuff. You have no idea what I'm about to say.
And you know my skill.
And I've cheated. I've been able to think on this all day because if I don't change my mind, this is probably what I'll end up. This will be my sermon topic for Sunday.
Oh, wow.
But there's this like popular thing, popular video stuff about what is a woman?
Yes.
What I've been thinking about is what is a marriage? What is a marriage? And I think it'd be cool if we could start out this because that's, subjects of marriage and different things people go through in a marriage. And just a lot of stuff has been coming to my mind all day long. But to put you on the spot, just as best you can.
I'm so good on the spot anyway.
Well, I'll put in some talking points along the way that we can hopefully dive a little bit deeper into this. But really, what is a marriage? Okay,
so the first answer, I guess, that anybody would probably say is a union of two people where two become one. That's sort of like a...
No, I think you're already ahead of the game.
You think?
I love the word union. Union is one of the words I was going to use. But I think you're ahead of the game. I think most people would start by just defining it.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah. But it's so much more than the definition. Honestly, I was thinking about it earlier. You can't really define it in a single sentence and do it justice.
Right.
It really needs a paragraph or more. But yeah, it's
depends
more
on who's talking.
Yeah.
Me or
well,
you.
I mean, it's not really that. I might be a little bit more.
For you, a paragraph is a big deal.
I can say a lot.
Yeah. For me, a paragraph is I'm just getting warmed up.
Yeah. Well, okay, get warmed up. What is a marriage? It's a union, two become one.
Yeah.
What else? Like, give me some thoughts on it.
Well, my next thought would be, that in a lot of ways, like we've talked about before, that, at least the way I see it or picture it in my mind, I guess I should say, is that in a lot of ways, the Lord, when he looks at us, there's sometimes he's sort of looking at me through the lens of you, like it's through you because, like you've said, you carry sort of a role, a different weight. And, the way that I am obedient to the Lord sometimes is by, being really obedient to you or submissive to you. And so if you are making decisions that aren't necessarily right, the way you're obedient to the Lord is to sort of have that honed in, and so I guess, I don't know, some people may not see it that way.
Well, but that doesn't really matter. I mean, that obviously that could be abused and that's not what we're talking about, but that is certainly part of a marriage,
right. So that's one thing that comes to my mind. And then another thing is sort of companionship for life, having your best friend, really, the longer you're with someone, the more you realize what it means, my other half. You're incomplete without the other, really. You really are. You become one, and you probably realize it more and more as you, I guess, age or as long as, the longer you're together. I don't know.
Well, that highlights another.
I can tell I'm not hitting any of the points that's on your mind.
That's good, though.
What's on your mind?
I hit you with it out of the blue.
Yeah.
What's on my mind is a ton of things. We won't even be able to talk about everything that's on my mind right now. I could probably go on about 30 minutes nonstop right now. But I actually just lost. What was the last thing you just said? Because I was actually going to say something about it. Oh, yeah, companionship.
Listening? No, I'm kidding.
Well, I was listening. Okay. I just was also thinking. And some people would say, well, you're describing the ideal that, they would say, well, I don't have that, And so there's a lot of aspects to marriage. But obviously the ideal is what everybody wants. But some interesting things that are interesting to me about marriage, to really do it the Bible way. Now, when I say this, I'm not saying I have done this. And, you would say the same thing. You probably haven't always been perfect. I mean, I think that you're perfect, but to really do it the Bible way, in a sense, it's living your life for someone else, for the one that you love.
Yeah.
And in another sense, I mean, the Bible actually says, these are some of the profound things that the Bible says about marriage. It actually says that your body is not your own.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that could be taken carnally, but it doesn't mean it that way. And in a lot of ways, how far does the union go? It should reach body, soul, and spirit in a sense, or to the mind. I mean, obviously, we have two separate souls, and we always will. And in reality, we have two separate bodies, and we always will. And we have two separate minds, and we always will. And yet, the longer you've been married, the more one-minded you are. If things are trending like they ought to, right? And there's a lot of things that we could probably bring up that really help that to happen. So, in a sense, a successful or good marriage is not an accident. It's not an accident. But in another sense, I mean, love really has an incredible power to do those things that self wouldn't do. But anyway, what I was thinking about is we're better friends now than we've ever been. Mm-hmm. But we would have said, 15 years ago that we were best friends. But, I think about our relationship a lot lately because you're a really good wife. And in a lot of ways, I just spring things on you. Even kind of this podcast was something that just, I was thinking, 8 weeks ago, because it's probably been about that long in the making, or at least 6 weeks in the making. But 8 weeks ago, we had no idea that we was going to be sitting here in our little studio thing doing a podcast together. But you just, you went with it, and that's how you've always been. But okay, so some interesting things about marriage. One, it says your body is not your own. But also, Adam, when Eve was brought to Adam, he said, "This is flesh of my flesh and bone of my bone, and she shall be called woman because she was taken out of man." Now, I've unpacked that before, but it's amazing to actually think about that. And so, when he says she was taken out of man, that's literally what he means. She was taken out of him. And so in some sense, they were soulmates in a sense. Because when God made Adam, Eve was in Adam, so to speak. I'm not getting mystical here, but marriage does have a mystical sense to it. And here's the other thing. So then God follows that up with saying, "Therefore shall a man leave father and mother and cleave to his wife, and they two shall be one flesh." And it's like, she was taken out of man, and so there's two people here, but in a miraculous God way, he's saying, but we're going to reunite that to one flesh again, because God is saying they shall be one flesh. And he does it through something called marriage. Marriage is God's doing, in a sense. Mm-hmm. Mankind did not create marriage. We did not imagine marriage. We did not invent marriage. And even though most cultures, I think, the world over, observe marriage, so to speak. They observe this monogamous bond for life between one man and one woman. Now, a lot of people obviously break that, and, a lot of cultures may not have the right weight to it. But marriage was actually the last thing created. Mm-hmm. Because, God made Adam and Eve. You could say Eve was the last thing, but really after Eve was made, God instituted this thing that we call marriage. And now the reason that's interesting to me, and you can chime in with your thoughts at any time, is done rightly, marriage is one of the most holy things humanity can do. Mm-hmm. Marriage separates humanity from everything else in the universe. Angels don't even marry, much less animals. So really, mankind is the only thing in any dimension the heavenly realm or the earthly realm, in any dimension that one could imagine, mankind is the only creation that God has gifted this thing that we call marriage. And it was before sin. It was before the fall. And so that's why I'm saying it's one of the most holy things. What I was thinking about, and we don't have to get into this for this podcast, but I keep losing my train of thought because I have so many thoughts coming to my mind. But marriage is, what's the word I'm looking for? Sanctity or sacred. You can't overemphasize.
Yeah. Well, I was about to say, and I think it goes with what you're saying, is, I mean, God even describes the relationship of himself to his people as a groom, a bride's,
Well, Christ is depicted
the
as
bride and
the groom, and the church is depicted as a bride.
Right.
In more than one place.
They call him a bride. What is it?
Bridegroom.
Bridegroom. I couldn't think of it. Bridegroom. Yeah, the bride and the bridegroom. And so, I mean, that's for God to put the relationship with him and his people, and in a reference of marriage, that tells you how much he thinks of a marriage bond and a marriage covenant.
Yes. Yes, so marriage is a covenant. And there's more than, and Jesus himself gives parables of a marriage to teach of our relationship to the Lord. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, in the book of Revelation, there's depictions of the church being all believers of all time gathered together in heaven, depicted as a bride. And then it's also called the Lamb's wife. So there's this, it's I think, metaphorical language in a sense. But there is the future uniting of mankind with God is described as a great marriage supper.
Right.
And the all believers is described as wife, but it doesn't even just end there. Even when teaching about how to approach marriage or behave yourself in a marriage, again, it's, Christ uses his self in relation to the church and the church in relation to him. And so I just was thinking about it. Marriage was instituted before sin ever existed. Sin didn't exist. And yet marriage existed. So marriage is not something that we do because we live in a fallen world. No. Marriage is, in a way, one piece of paradise that we have left from the garden. The whole earth was cursed. The ground was cursed. And the man and the woman was punished, and sorrow you'll bring forth, and, he'll multiply your sorrow in your conception, and in the sweat of my brow I'm going to, eat all the days of my life, and so we have to work and all that. But marriage is a piece of paradise that we have if we approach it with the right respect and thoughtfulness. And, because here's what I was thinking about today too, and you can just tell me what you think about this, but I was thinking about some of the things people say that's terrible. They say stuff like, look but don't touch. What do you think when I say that?
Oh, that don't fly.
That's terrible.
That's terrible.
That's terrible advice.
Right.
No.
It misses the whole point of so many things. Yeah, I mean, because the heart is the biggest issue of it all, and if it's in your heart, that's not really faithfulness or loyalty, and and if you were on the other end, it'd be hurtful.
Yeah. So what I was thinking about is things that people do that chip away at this great thing that we have called marriage. So you can build to a marriage or you can chip away at it. Mm-hmm. And things that people say or do or think that causes, over a long period of time, their marriage to not be what they want. But it's like what I hope to one day be able to, maybe in a sermon or whatever, not on the podcast, but connect some dots for people. Mm-hmm. That if your marriage is not, go ahead.
No, it's
you was going to say something.
Well, it reminds me, this is way back when you and I were dating, mm-hmm. or maybe early on married. I don't remember. But I remember, that thing, there was sort of a popular thing
hall
at the
pass.
time, the hall pass. Yeah. And it was sort of intended to be like this playful,
Oh, yeah.
like so far-fetched. And basically what it boiled down to is who's your favorite actress or who do you think is really pretty that's a famous person. That's your hall pass, right?
Well, it was more than just that. They was basically saying like, oh, if I was ever given the chance to be
Right.
with this one person, my wife or my husband would excuse me because it's my hall pass.
But it was like so far-fetched that nobody actually thought, well, at least in my mind, nobody actually thought, yes, you actually get a hall pass. But so that's what I mean is like it was basically a funny way of sort of saying, this is who I think is really attractive or really whatever. But, and you said back then, you were like, that's just damaging to our relationship to even talk like that because, all it does is now when we're watching that movie that's got that person in it, or maybe that singer singing a song or something, all I can think about is, I wonder what he's thinking, or, is he like checking her out, or is he wishing I look like that, or, comparing and now all of a sudden it's in my head that I'm not that person for you, there's me, but then there's, but if you could, you'd, even
damage.
though, yes, it's just damage.
Yeah. It's
and that
very
was so
unwise.
insightful to me at the time.
The way they portrayed it, the hall pass thing, it's kind of like a joking thing, but that's really what it makes me think of. And again, I don't want to, I'm not trying to get crunk up here, but the Bible says fools mock at sin or make a mockery of sin. They laugh at things that are sinful. And I know this much is true. Sin always will downplay itself.
Yes,
sin will always portray itself as it was just innocent fun. It was harmless. Come down off it, man. We're just having fun. Well, sin always says that and does that. But yeah, the hall pass thing, the look but don't touch thing. And there's even other simple things that I thank God that I was actually taught against this stuff as a child. My grandfather, both grandfathers may have had a lot of things wrong, but, they did give me some great values of a man, how he's supposed to treat a woman, and even higher than that, how he's supposed to treat his marriage and all that kind of stuff and how to be respectful. And one of the things I remember being told not to do, I was a kid. I didn't even understand it then, but they was like, don't say stuff like my old lady. The old ball and chain.
That's terrible. What a terrible,
it is. It is. Okay?
Reference. Ball and chain. Like that bind you. It's,
it's a terrible depiction. It's a dead weight. It's creating sores on me. I'm having to drag it by my ankle. It's a prison thing. It's right. And even, now I know it's cultural, but it doesn't really make it right. Now, we're not going to change the culture with a podcast like this. Mm-hmm. But if someone watches it, maybe they'll think about some of this stuff. It even became popular to joke about going to a wedding as though it's a funeral.
Yeah.
I'm going to your funeral. Your life is ending, Right. All of these things that are...
And even like a bachelor party or a bachelorette party, it's like, it's your last night of freedom.
Yeah, it's like your last night of freedom.
Wait a minute.
So go and do all kinds of crazy things that you're probably going to end up doing. And
it's built up to be this big party celebration. Like, this is your last night of fun. It's exactly the opposite, of what the truth of your, marriage is. It's literally the opposite. The best part's yet to come.
Right. And so this cultural, I don't know the word, but downplaying marriage, making it less sacred, less of the beautiful thing that it really is. It has a lot of effects that we don't even think about. And so, how far you can go with this, I really don't know. But it seems to me that a lot of what we would call good conservative Christian people today, a lot of what we have a problem with in this country that we live in or in this world that we live in is, I'm not going to say it's the church's fault. It's not the church's fault. But when you begin to kind of accept and talk in the way that the world does, and when good followers of Christ have their hall pass and they begin to talk that way, the society itself is also losing its picture of marriage. It's losing its, long story short, I haven't really even said it the way I want to, but what I'm getting at is, even so, like an unbeliever, marriage is supposed to be a light. It's supposed to be a light to the world. And when they see us living like they do or communicating like they do, or not really portraying and showing the world this sacred, beautiful, precious, priceless piece of paradise that we call marriage, when we begin to not view it that way, well, of course they're not going to, but what happens by proxy is that now teenagers don't think it's something worth saving yourself for.
Mm-hmm.